Welcome to the MSLead Chronicles. It's a podcast on a mission in medical affairs and leadership. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy, Chad Fellers, we're going to have casual talk about important topics and challenges in leadership. So whether you want to elevate or further develop as a leader, or your ambition is to transition to a leadership role, you've tuned into the right podcast, and we are so glad you're here. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome back to MSLead Chronicles. I'm your host, Chad Fellers, joined by my partner in crime, Mary Morton. Thanks so much for joining us on our leadership journey. And if you haven't followed our page on LinkedIn, please do so today. Our aim is to offer more than just a podcast. We want to share various thoughts and tips throughout the week to encourage and empower those in medical affairs to be the best leaders they can be. So, Mary, I can't wait. We have a great topic to dig in today. But first, I want to thank our listeners for the feedback that we've had on both 1 and 2 of our conversations with Deanna Tucker on psychological safety. Mary, why don't you share, before we get into today's topic, why don't we recap what Deanna's key takeaways were?
Sounds like a great idea. Okay, so in establishing this culture of psychological safety, you've got to first establish that environment is going to be learning in nature. Once you've done that, you set up this expectation that you can't just sit back quietly, you got to speak up, because that is the way that we innovate and continue to grow. And then that building that culture of curiosity, absolutely necessary for success amongst the team. Again, growth and comfort level among the people on the team, and everything is great and growing and innovative, and people are happy. That's what it's all about. Happy people are successful and productive people.
Yeah. I loved the advice that Deanna gave. It's just been great getting to know her over the years, and I can attest for the listeners that want to know the things that she said, that she definitely lives out as she leads her teams. I've had the pleasure of working alongside several of the MSLs that she has as well, and they offer that same very feedback. So again, thanks to Deanna for choosing to join us, because we want to be able to learn from one another. So transitioning to our focus topic for today. So Mary, I love this. This is one of the things that I think that I'm passionate about, really is around field team excellence. So let's talk about strategies for elevating teamwork and collaboration. Before we get into it, just want to remind the listeners of what our podcast structure is. First thing we're going to do, knowing that you may be limited on time, of course, we want you to listen to all of our interaction and conversations. You never know what you're going to get with this, what's in store, but we want to give you the key takeaways so you can have some practical applications. Again, go back to follow our MSLead Chronicles page. You'll have some of those tips as well to be reinforced. But we want to have the key takeaways, then we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive and then recap it, and then maybe get to know one another and learn some things about Mary or myself and ask would you rather questions. Who knows what that's going to be. So anyway, let's get this started. Let me start with the key takeaways. So first, as leaders of remote teams, we must understand the types of challenges that impact teamwork and collaboration. The second would be fostering teamwork and collaboration with remote teams requires intentional effort and use of effective communication and collaboration tools. So those are the 2 key takeaways of today's topic. We need to make sure that we are doing both of these. What are your thoughts, Mary?
Well, I mean, I love the way that you first of all set up the key takeaways, because the first part we're going to be talking about here are some of the things that we're going to encounter, and then come in the end and figure out how we're going to fix them and how we're going to try to best maximize what we got to work with to overcome them. So yeah, love that. So as we kind of get started into talking about the challenges. So I mean, one of the first things I kind of think about is just the logistics, the barriers in terms of communication.
Yeah.
Because when you got remote teams, and like there's a company I'm beginning to work with, it's in England, so it's probably way worse for them. But you guys have different time zones. You have at least four, I would guess. I mean, what is
Yeah.
that like? Trying to just manage to get everybody together.
It does take a village. I think one of the things is really just trying to be mindful of that. Um, and that's been a struggle, quite honestly. When we think about it's been an evolution, rather, I think, and really COVID and forcing everybody into these remote types of workspace really brought this to the forefront. I think a couple of things that we have to do first is be mindful of the time and the way that we send communications, to be respectful for that. Everything from one thing, maybe it's delaying emails when you want to send important things to articulate different points or key topics, not to send these where someone on the West Coast is getting at 4 a.m. in the morning on a notification, right? So really thinking and being intentional about the information that we share and the time that we do that. I think that that's one thing. I think one of the things that I really want to do with my team, especially in a remote, knowing that now travel's back in play before our calendars start piling up, is really protect our time and then block that out. Maybe it's blocking out a certain hour of a day. Mondays and Fridays typically seem to be the best days for medical affairs teams, especially that are in the field. Knowing that travel usually goes out first thing Tuesday morning and comes back Thursday evening. So really trying to set aside a time. So the earliest that we will do it, at least on our team, is 10 a.m. Central. That way I can kind of capture all of those. So those are a couple of the ways that we're trying to work to reduce the communication barriers, as well as keep things from being information overload as well too. So being mindful that via text, via Microsoft Teams, whatever that communication type that you utilize, is just really keeping that in mind and being respectful of others, both personal and professional time.
So do you feel like, and I don't want to just like hang on this one because I know we've probably got a lot of good ones to cover, but do you feel like, because these are challenges of remote teams, right? So do you feel like the fact that people don't get to be physically in the same room a lot, do you think that can like inhibit the ability of the teams to really collaborate, maybe get each other?
So it's easy to live on an island. There's no doubt about it. And then there's a multitude of factors. You have different personality types. So some people like to work in silos. I think I'm the personality type that I want to break down silos. When we talk about even going back, I feel like this is a broken record in many ways. We're talking about the whole model of servant leadership. We have to be intentional about ways to really bring that unity. One of those is giving a sense of ownership. And so like when we're coming up with projects, things of that nature, the more that this can be a bottom up approach versus top down,
Oh, yeah.
helps break down some of those walls, but you have to be very intentional with these types of things. I try to check in with the individuals or send a text to the entire team, and then also follow up from an individual perspective to try to keep that, try to be strategic about different projects, things like that, pairing someone from the West Coast to the East, or a PhD to a PharmD, whatever that looks like, to help so we can continue to learn from one another. And if we have that environment, that helps with that type of enhance the visibility. And I would say the same thing would apply for any of opportunities within our cross-functional stakeholders.
Yeah, so that's actually now you made me think of two things. The visibility is obviously really important because they need to be recognized for what they do, and people need to be aware of what they're doing. Especially if somebody needs to be coming along and patting them on the back. But then you brought up, so lack of visibility, let's just say that's a challenge. Let's kind of talk about when we get to the second takeaway about how to overcome that. But you brought up, and so trying to pair up people from different academic backgrounds, because that's something that speaks to some of the cultural diversity on a team. So I mean, sometimes it's a little bit of not really understanding the other people on your team. And so maybe that's, an opportunity for someone to really embrace their differences. But, we can talk a little bit later about how you can, as a leader, encourage that to happen.
That may be a topic all for a podcast altogether. I think that may be something to really hit. I would say, just speaking just in an abbreviated way, and I know you laugh at me when I say abbreviated, because that means another 30 seconds at least of conversation, if not more, which
I honestly didn't think you knew what the word abbreviated meant.
Thanks for that dig.
Yeah.
I'm used to it. I needed that. What I would say is a lot of that requires intentionality as well too. And there's a couple ways, not only pairing people and being intentional with that.
Mhm.
You can do things like ride-alongs where there's between teammates, so they can see not only the styles that they communicate, but then get to know one another on more of a personal background. One of the things that I love to be able to do is on team calls, for example, we want to work hard and play hard. But to be able to do both of those, we have to trust one another. So really even designating time just to get to know one another, maybe spotlight someone to be able to share some of their experiences. A lot of that starts with leadership, though, I would say, because the more vulnerable that I am about the things from my personal standpoint, that gives the freedoms for others to know that it's a safe place. If you have safety with that, that allows you to embrace cultural differences.
Yeah, and that's so important for a leader to foster that environment, and it starts with you, right?
Yep. And I think just even thinking about the different the challenges. We've mentioned several of these. I think there's technology issues that are a challenge, team dynamics, potentially misalignment of goals, work-life balance. Probably don't have time to discuss all of these today.
Work-life balance, though, that's a big one, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think, again, field teams traditionally have been able to stay on top and have that appropriate work-life balance. I think that you saw a significant shift. I think probably our listeners would agree. Once we entered into a pandemic, and then you had a lot of headquarters people all of a sudden start working in a remote capacity as well. All of a sudden, my calendars just started populating with meeting after meeting after meeting, because now we're available, we're not traveling, etc. And I found myself, Mary, there would be times I would be starting at my desk at 7:30 in the morning and literally not leaving until 5 or 5:30 from a break. I felt like I was back in the pharmacy world, in retail pharmacy, where not getting a lunch break. And part of that was because we were having meetings to prepare for meetings, and then meetings to debrief on the meetings that we had. And that just leads to this unhealthy balance where your productivity from your people really just starts to deplete. So it's really being mindful and saying, what is necessary to really optimize the way that we work versus what's a nice to have potentially as well too. And that really requires the trust of your team for them to give you that type of feedback as well. How have you done that, knowing that in your space, I know you have a team that works in remote ways and transition to that, having a couple of different offices as well. What's your experience been?
Like I always say, there's a lot of similarities between us and you guys. Save for the educational background you guys have. But it's so when we started with COVID, I remember, I feel like it was like March 13th or something like that. We all started working from home, and it was difficult for a while because I'm a people person. I got to be around people all the time, and most of the people on my team are that way too. Some people loved it, some people took advantage of it, and but what we found was that when things got back to normal, um, some people were actually, most people were much more productive with their work from home days. And of course, as most everybody knows, I took advantage of like, hey, I can do this anywhere, and picked up my family and moved to Austin from Frisco, where the other office is. And it was a great opportunity to expand the business and hire some people here in Austin too. And it is challenging. A lot of the things that we're talking about, finding a way to stay cohesive. And even though I don't see more than half of my team most of the time. So, I mean, I have some ideas I can share once we get to the how to fix this problem thing. But I'm excited to hear some of your ideas as well, because I need it. We all do.
So what I hear though from you is you did have that element of granted trust. I mean, people were forced to end the situation from a remote standpoint. Once the pandemic resolved, there was an option, and you've seen some companies that really have required people going back to be in a physical location together. There's certainly some benefits of that. I think even with the new generation that's coming too, there's a prioritization of flexibility, even over the work that's being done. So I think we have to be mindful of this. Overarching though, what I heard from you is you really displayed amount of granted trust, even when there was a return to the workplace, to really be able to help tailor to the needs of your people, and you still saw success that came from it. So I love that about you, that you were able to do that, and that was the way that you chose to function. I would just say, how do you make sure? Let's go back to this. How do you, on the work-life balance, how do you make sure that as a leader you're being mindful of that for your team, and you're keeping them in check as well too, knowing that burnout's an issue, and you're in it for a marathon, not necessarily a sprint. And sometimes we make it the opposite. What are some ways that you've been intentional to navigate that challenge?
Well, I know why you're asking me this, because I'm a workaholic. And with the help of a lot of therapy, I've tried to back off on that, but I'm trying to set a good example for my team too. I like one of the people on my team would say, "I'm sorry, I couldn't schedule my doctor's appointment for later in the day. I had to do it." I'm like, I don't care. Your health is more important than anything. Whenever your doctor's appointment has to be, or I have this family issue, and I unexpectedly am going to have to be out of town for 2 days. I'm so sorry. I'll bring my laptop. I'll work. It was somebody who's trying to help their older parents, and I'm like, do not take your laptop with you. Do what you need to do. So I'm almost sort of forcing it. They're not really having to be forced anymore, because they know that they don't need to feel guilt for having or wanting to take time with their family. I took a vacation for the first time ever, which for an entire month to Europe. Never done that. I did not take my laptop. I know a lot of people, y'all don't believe this. I did not take my laptop. I did periodically check my phone, but just to clean out the junk, so that when I got back, there wouldn't be a whole bunch, but I passed things off. I mean, I think you have to have that work-life balance, or you're going to go absolutely crazy, because I think Deanna said it last week, work will be there.
That's right.
When you get back from whatever it is you've needed to take care of.
That was going to be my question to you, Mary, is did your business survive even after being out for a month and not not being involved as engaged as you typically would be?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
You're,
I
yeah.
I'm the M in Symbio, but I am not Symbio. We're all Symbio.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I would say yes. The more trust you have, the more you empower. We've talked about that, right? You don't the freedom to fail, and that you're not um, you're not micromanaging your people. You're holding them accountable, but you're giving them the freedom to figure out how to really navigate and make that happen. So I love this. So in our time though, let's transition a little bit and talk about some solutions to this, right? So what are ways when we think about, when we go back to the key takeaway, right, around fostering teamwork and collaboration
mhm.
and what it requires, talking about the intentional effort and use of communication and the collaboration tools. Let's get into that. I think when we were talking through some of these things, I jotted down a few, and I'll just list these, and we can go into whatever it is the ones that you want to do. I
Okay.
think we can have that conversation. So.
Okay.
Um, Thinking about this, it's almost like a top 10, if you will. And so I think when we're thinking about the effective communication and collaboration, the first is regular communication. Second is use of collaboration tools. We want to establish clear goals and expectations, encourage the open communication with each individual on our team, virtual team building activities. There's promote knowledge sharing. A big one, I think, is celebrating achievements, as we discussed earlier, flexibility and empathy, encouraging cross-functional collaboration, even leading by example. So those are 10, and for our time today, we probably don't have time to go through each one of them. But are there any that you really want to kind of dig into for the rest of our time?
Well, so I know a lot of people use like Zoom or Microsoft Teams for their phone and video and maybe like a chat function. At Symbio, we use something called Ring Central, which I think works very similarly. And in them, you can like direct message each other, or you can create these little teams for different
Okay.
functions, you know. So like one of the teams we have is called layoffs and mergers. So that if one person on the team finds out, you know, reads something in the news that XYZ Pharma announced layoffs, whoever sees it first is going to post it in there so that we all know. Or I guess recently the one that we saw was because Gilead is one of my clients,
Okay.
and that they just announced that they are acquiring a company called Sema Bay or Sima Bay. I think it's Sema Bay. And so somebody posted that in there. Did you see that Gilead's buying? So we can all share this kind of information. And that's really important because we want to stay on top of what's going on in our business. So using tools like that, I think is very important.
And it also, I think it helps set you up for the week or you're planning about what you want to do, right? When you talk about when you see the layoffs, all of a sudden it allows your entire team to focus on a plan of action without having a point person that has to take charge and offer those instructions. You have that guidance and knowing an approach. So I love that. We utilize Microsoft Teams. I know that from a chat function, you can do that set up group chats.
Okay.
You can also set up from an individual conversations, etc. So that's one way we do it. Obviously, text message is another way of trying to communicate. I think the biggest thing is empowering your team to see, okay, here's the options that we have. Instead of me force feeding something, obviously we have to come to a consensus, but what is the motive preference for the team, your individuals on your team, and then how do we say yes to that as much as possible versus saying it's all going to come through email. We know I've got some of my team that don't like to check email or just do it once a day, right? So how do we communicate those things that are a little more urgent? So I think that's fascinating, and I love that idea. I know that there's programs like Slack and things that I don't have as much experience with. And maybe some of our listeners would offer that feedback potentially as well too. But there's some great venues for communication that are out there. What
Yeah.
other things can we chat about?
Well, I think with my team anyway, everything is not always my decision. I welcome, encourage, other people to be a part of these decisions, like how we're going to collaborate. And we actually just had a meeting on Tuesday about this, where we're like, this is one of the systems we're setting up. We use a lot of the Google Drive. And, how should we set these things up? What's most efficient? So we collaborated on figuring out what's the best, sort of SOP to manage some of these things. Believe me, if they wanted me to kind of figure all that stuff out, yeah, I think I had a page, can you program the VCR moment last week? It wasn't exactly that, but it was something like that. So they don't want me
A VCR, like
stop.
half of our listeners probably don't even know what a VCR is, Mary.
I can't be that old, but I did use the word cassette tape in a text message, in a group message, actually in our Symbio group. Cassette tape. Yes.
Oh, Mary, it's so fun just to give some digs. Now I've got some other things to think about to send you in the week. So um, yeah, I think the more we can do things, other things that we talk about, team building activities. I think that I've been a part of some of those. I think one way I've seen it in a previous life, and I definitely want to incorporate it again. We would send in. I would have each one of my teammates send in their favorite song. And then what we would do at the beginning of the first part of our call would be I'd play the song and it'd be, okay, can you identify which person is the one that actually picked this song, right? So it's really interesting. It gets a lot of camaraderie and things like that. So any types of those small things, it doesn't have to be a huge production, but that is a way that we can certainly help encourage team collaboration, etc. And then
I
really
want to point something out though. I'm going to interrupt you here. I stole that idea from you.
Yeah.
Remember, it was a couple of years ago, and you said you had gathered up everybody's what's your pump me up song or whatever. And we got together as a team, and I played everybody's, and I was like, whose song do you think this is? Whose pump me up song do you think this is? That was fun. I need to do that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any of those types of small things, little steps make when they're cumulative, right? And so we go back to the whole thing about culture, right? So cultures can be one of two things. It's either falling back or you're moving forward. It just can't stay the same. And so these little small nuggets that you can do along the way, and then even get your team into it where they can give them the ownership of facilitating that too. So there's so many different ways that we can discuss and really push this. Same for encouraging opportunities and being intentional with setting up cross-functional collaborations, bringing them in onto team calls, identifying different opportunities that go along with IDPs, et cetera, to put people in position for exposure, etc. So I think there's just so many different approaches of these top 10. And I think one of the things we can do is we can make sure on our page that we can put some of these things in case someone's listening and can't keep track of all the different types of ways, and not all have to be started at the same time, right? It's just starting with a small step to move forward with progress. So what other thoughts do you have on this topic, Mary? I think there's been some really good conversation around this.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've actually observed among my team is, sometimes you just kind of have to set the ball in motion. If you hook a couple of people up on a project and they spend more time with each other, they get to know each other a little bit more on like a personal basis. They do a great job on the project. The next thing you know, those two are going to come to you and say, we have an idea for a project. And And then they just start doing it themselves. And nobody needs to tell them what to do. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you're empowering smart people that work alongside you to help tell you what to do, especially if you're in that leadership type of role. That's why, I mean, when you have all these terminal degrees, when you're thinking about from a field medical standpoint, why would you not leverage the great knowledge that surrounds you, right? So I think that's a great way that you discuss, Mary. Any closing thoughts from your end as we wrap up our talk today? I think this has been really good.
No, it's been great. I don't really have any closing thoughts specifically for this this discussion. As usual, I would just say share this with your friends. If you've liked what you've heard, be sure to like and download the episodes. Follow us on LinkedIn. If you have an idea, throw it out. I will say our next podcast, we will have a guest, and she is going to join us to talk about how to effectively interview and hire the person you're looking for or the people you're looking for. I actually have a 5-question rapid fire. So, and let me see, Chad, these are going to be for you this time. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to say a word and you have to say the first word that comes to your mind.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, airline.
Delta.
Dog breed.
Catahoula.
Catahoula. All right, we don't have time to dig into that, but I'm going to have to ask you about that later. Okay, pain.
Hip. I'm getting old.
Okay.
It's been 84 years, as they say on Titanic. Okay, what else?
Oh, okay. You threw me off. Vacation.
Golf course.
Okay. All right. Didn't expect that one. Okay. And
I mean, it's easy to say beach, right? I mean, that's such a anyway.
I didn't know if you were going to say Paris or Cozumel, but that's okay.
Do you know how many golf courses there are across the U.S.? I think that gives me lots of options, or across the globe, right? So opens up a can of lots of worms.
Okay. Okay. And now you've made me forget my last one. And my piece of paper is on my other desk. Ooh, goodness.
I have a way of doing this to you, don't I, Mary? Sometimes we go down rabbit holes. I make you follow me, and then you can't even remember. That's the beauty of my mojo. So anyway, it's been great again. This has been a lot of fun.
That has been a great time.
Thank you to our listeners so much again for all the feedback. Thanks for continuing to join us on our leadership journey. Just remember that leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders learn from leaders. We are thankful that you are a part of that. We want to learn from you as well, too. Until next time, really work on trying to implement one of the things that we talked about today. And I guarantee you will see results and your team will appreciate it. Have a good one, and we look forward to our next conversation.